Hey, so I'm Karen Treisman, clinical psychologist, author and trainer. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sleep and nighttime difficulties at the moment. And I'm really mindful before I start that for some of you, you will really notice changes in your sleep and tiredness levels. So this will really resonate for you. For other people, you will historically have had sleep and nightmare and nighttime difficulties. So you might notice this fits for that, or that you've noticed a compounding or reinforcement or change since COVID. And for other people, you'll be sleeping really well and there won't be changes and this won't resonate as much for you, and that's fantastic. But hopefully it will give you some insight and support into friends, family members, people you're working with who might be finding sleep difficult. So there's lots of different ways we could look at this, and I think that people will oscillate between them for many, but we have some people who might be sleeping lots more or feeling so tired and exhausted, and we're going to talk about that first. And then there might be some other people, or the same people who might be having both, who will be struggling to fall asleep, stay asleep, waking up during the night, having very disturbed sleep, possibly having nightmares, and we'll talk about that a little bit afterwards. There's so many different reasons, and I by no means can go through all of them in a short clip. My hope is to give you a few ideas, a few reflections, a few things to think about, and that can then be a springboard for future reflection, discussion, and that you can add to that. So first, let's think about, for those of us who are feeling exhausted, tired, maybe sleeping much more than usual. So I think at the moment, one of those reasons is emotional exhaustion. I think a lot of us have so many big emotions going around in our bodies and our minds, whether that is shock, uncertainty, sadness, worry, anger, frustration, injustice, helplessness, confusion, so many different feelings that just making sense, holding, bearing witness to those can be exhausting, can be absolutely full on. There's so much more to process, to hold, to make sense of, and that's a lot. That is a big, heavy emotional toll. That's a lot of things whirling round in our minds. And that emotional exhaustion is widened and added by often holding the emotions of so many other people at the moment. So many people around us are holding those emotions. We might be supporting those people as a parent, as a family member, as a neighbour, as a therapist, as whatever ways. But we are being marinated and soaked in so many people's emotions. And within that, for many people, when you are feeling a particular emotion, often you go to someone else who's feeling more grounded, or who's the person who can give you a hug or give you great advice, or you turn on the TV for light relief, or you go to, I don't know, people go to the gym, or you go and see a therapist, whatever that might be. But what's happening for some people is you've got these big emotions, but then you can't go and give that person a hug for some people, or you can't go to the gym, or you can't go to your therapist, or if you can, it's online and feels a bit different, or the person who you usually go to for advice is really struggling. And not only are those big emotions, but there's new emotions that have been compounded with lots of waves and changes that people are having to make sense of. So I think that's one reason why a lot of people are just feeling emotionally exhausted, depleted, almost like there's been an emotional hoover or vacuum. The other thing that's happening a lot is moral fatigue, moral exhaustion. And I think that's on a few different levels, and obviously will mean different things to different people. One of that is the constant having to think about decisions over and over again that you wouldn't normally waste energy or time thinking about, or most people wouldn't. So, should I go to the shops and risk going to the shops, or should I get that takeaway, or what's going to happen if I don't have a paycheck coming in there, or these are issues that for some people they might worry about, but for COVID it's brought about new things. Should I do this or should I do that? All of those dilemmas, there are lots of little things that people are sort of thinking and making sense of, as well as the bigger moral dilemmas about how to restructure how people parent, how people school, how people work. So many things that people are trying to think about, negotiate. And for some people, this has also brought about lots of life questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? What's the world about? Why has this happened? Where do I want to live? What do I want to do? Where is my life going to? Have I achieved what I've achieved? There's lots of big things that are being highlighted. So I think that moral exhaustion is making some people feel really tired, especially when it's mixed and interwoven with emotional exhaustion. Then there is the additional of focus, concentration and attention exhaustion that you're having for many people to do a lot of what people would normally do on a computer screen, where you're having to look at a screen, which we know can increase people's eye difficulties, headaches, all sorts of things, but you're having to zone in into a really small space, really focus on people's features, not have the room to distract you, and having to talk without the same reciprocal interaction, without the same sort of energy that you can pick up from people, and you're talking to a fairly one-dimensional object, and doesn't have that same bounce and connection. So I think that focus and attentional, also married with the emotional and the moral exhaustion, is one of the other reasons why people might be feeling tired and exhausted. Adding a few more, there's been a huge amount of change, transitions, adjustment, whether that's been change of how you do your job, change of being an at-home parent, change of how you used your skills, change of how you would do your shopping, change of how you would make sense of things, change of finances, change of how you make sense of the world, change of services, change of the status quo. There's been a lot to get one's head round, and not only are there lots of changes, but often they're happening very quickly, so they're quite unpredictable, it's happening quite rapidly, the goalpost is changing. So that's exhausting in itself and takes a lot of time and energy, but it's also the sense of people trying to constantly work really hard to move or make sense with the times. And that's a really big thing as well. And I think in addition to that, the change, as we know, like when you start a job, you feel exhausted because there's so much new information to take in. And I think a lot of people are feeling that. So that's that exhausted type of feeling. There's the practical bits that suddenly someone might have gone from being really active and having a busy day, running around, doing things, to having a much slower pace day. And that physically your body isn't moving around as much, you're not burning as much energy, is likely to make you more exhausted and more tired. Or for some people it'll be the opposite, that they're used to having a 9 to 5 at the desk job and suddenly they're running around with children the whole time, and that's exhausting. So all of those different bits and time and change of what your body and movement is doing. I think there's also a lot to think about around, so a lot of people at the moment are feeling quite demotivated, and I know other people are feeling very motivated, but for some people will be feeling quite low, quite down, quite depressed, quite what's going to happen, what impact is this going to have on me? And we know that when people are feeling low or demotivated or down, that can make people more tired and more exhausted, and you sleep more. Let alone people who've been physically unwell, who haven't felt that they have the physical energy to be moving around or to do things. And obviously when you're physically unwell, you naturally need more sleep and are tired. I could go on and on and on, but I hope that gives some people some of the reasons why we might be sleeping more. We don't have something to look forward to in the same way. We might be physically changing. We might be emotionally exhausted, morally exhausted, physically exhausted. We might have too much focus exhaustion, the change or loss of routines, the adjustment, feeling unwell. So I hope that gives a flavour of some of those. Let's turn a little bit on the head and talk about, for those people who are struggling more to stay asleep, to fall asleep, are waking up more during the night, might be having nightmares, because some of those are similar reasons to what we spoke about above, and other ones are different. And again, this is just some ideas, some food for thought. I guess one of the big ones that I've been thinking about is to go to sleep is the ultimate ability to down-regulate your body, to change the pace and the status of your arousal, to unwind, to calm down, to be still. And that is much, much harder if you have worries, stress, adrenaline pumping around in your body and in your mind. If you've got whirling thoughts and worries round in your mind, like a whirlpool or tornado or a tumble dryer going round in your mind, if your brain and mind and body feels full up, that it's spilling out, that you've got so much to make sense of, then being still, quiet, calm, that's going to be really, really difficult. Some people, their bodies and minds are in a ready to fight, that they're in a place that they want to run. So being still and sleeping, that's going to be very, very hard, because people's minds are going 100 miles per hour, or it's like a hamster wheel, round and round and round and round. So that's going to be much harder to sleep. The other thing about sleep is that often nighttime is when you're alone with your thoughts. There's silence, there's time to actually think and make sense of the world, of what's in your mind, of what's happened in that day. And that can be quite overwhelming at the moment if people have lots of worries and thoughts and uncertainties in their mind. Worries about health, worries about other people's health, worries about those who have died or who are dying, worries about job, food, poverty, finances, worries about what's happening in the world, our healthcare system, our social care system, our education system, worried about what's going to happen next, worried about what someone did because they snapped or they lost their temper or they're having troubles with their relationships, worried about all of those different things. That nighttime is often a time when those come up, let alone for those people where nighttime is historically difficult anyway. Difficult to be in the dark, difficult because it takes you back down a time hole to a time where nighttime was scary, nighttime was unsafe, didn't know what was happening the next day. And that's a lot, isn't it? The unpredictability and uncertainty. What am I going to have to deal with tomorrow? What's going to have changed? What am I going to contend with? How am I going to cope? Why did I respond the way I did? Lots of those different thoughts that are spilling out that are going to make it harder to rest, to be still, to fall asleep. Some people, as we were saying before, with their bodies usually have burnt a lot of energy or movement and aren't doing that same thing, so have a lot of pent up sort of feelings and emotions and body sensations that they've not burnt out. Other people might be lying there and feeling much more hypervigilant about their bodies, might be feeling much more worried about what's going on in my body. Why am I having a bit of a sore throat or breathlessness or those difficulties? So that can be a big thing for people, that they're scanning their bodies and that's making them be much more hypervigilant and aware and finding it harder to rest. Other people might be mourning the loss or the grief, loss of a person, loss of money, loss of security, loss of hope, loss of routine, loss of role, so many different losses that people might be whirling around. Another thing that's happening that's going to be impacting people's, or might be impacting people's way of being, is that people are being exposed to a lot more distressing information or material, whether that's the news, whether that's other people's distress, whether that's stories, images, videos. And so because people are being exposed to more distressing information, of course that's more likely that that's going to be having an imprint or an impact on what people are seeing or feeling or in people's minds. I guess a couple of other little ones that are springing to my mind, and that's that at the moment a lot of people are experiencing trauma, loss, distress, worry, but it's coming in a shocked way, or it's coming in a very fragmented, discontinued, disintegrated way. It's raw, it's fresh, it's unprocessed, it's unresolved. And what that means is that when something is raw or unprocessed, it often pops out or comes out in a sensation, in a feeling, in an image, in a nightmare, because our brains and minds haven't had time or the skills or the strategies to be able to connect the dots, to be able to put it in its place, to be able to make sense of it. So the rawness and the freshness is popping out, and our minds and bodies are trying to make sense of all this new feeling and information, and that might be coming out in different feelings, in different intrusive images, and in nightmares. And for some people that will take them down a time hole to other scary times in their life, or other times in their life where they felt powerless or helpless or unsafe, as well as some of the things about what the next day will bring, that unpredictability. So I could go on and on and on, but I hope that gives you some of a flavour as to why people might struggle to fall asleep, stay asleep, have nightmares, or sleep too much, why our sleep might be impacted at this time. I do have my Neon the Nightmare Ninja book, as well as my Neon the Nightmare cuddly toy, which can give lots and lots of information to support children, although lots in there for adolescents and adults, about making nighttime more comforting, more supportive, more relaxing, more soothing. And there will be other follow-up material as well about how to help those who are struggling with nighttime and sleep difficulties. I really hope that helps and look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you.